Musician Robert Palmer once wrote that when you fall in love, your mind is not your own. You can't sleep, you can't eat. Like Mr. Palmer, we all have to face it. We're addicted to love, and there's brain scans to prove it.
We found activity in a tiny little factory called the nucleus accumbens. And this brain region, it becomes active with all of the addictions, all of the substance addictions, everything from nicotine to alcohol to heroin, and all of the behavioral addictions, everything from kleptomania, actually, to gambling addiction. And this little brain region, the nucleus, becomes extremely active when you're not only happily in love, but when you are rejected in love. We can honestly say now that romantic love is an addiction.
Dr. Helen Fisher is a biological anthropologist and senior research fellow at the Kinsey Institute. As a leading expert on the biology of love, it's no surprise she's the chief science advisor to Match.com and author of 6 books. Through her research, Fisher's discovered romantic love is a natural addiction. She and Dr. Lucy Brown founded a website to help people understand exactly what's happening when we fall in love.
I know from our brain scanning studies that the brain systems that are activated are the reward systems. Now, they found those reward systems first in the brain by studying drugs like cocaine. So these systems became known as kind of addiction systems, maybe a bad thing because it was associated with cocaine. But the natural system is the one that's in place for us to enjoy water when we're really thirsty. You know how great water tastes when you're really thirsty, cold water. So that's a natural reward that we need. And in a sense, we need to be addicted to water. And I think we need to be addicted to each other.
Brown says addiction helps us stay together and form a deep attachment. She's a clinical professor in neurology at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. To her, love addiction is positive. We're wired to be addicted to each other so we can continue the human race.
These feelings of romance, love, attachment are spontaneous. They're built-in, wired. Certainly, maybe after a long-term relationship for some people, then they have to work at it and say, okay, I'm going to choose to love this person today. But for the early stages of romance that people typically feel, and for longer-term attachment, it's not a choice. Hunger isn't a choice. Thirst isn't a choice. And love is the same system.
Traits like euphoria, obsessive thinking, and high energy are associated with love addiction. But just like with all incredible highs, there can be devastating lows.
People even can destroy their lives. So a love addiction in a negative way is seen in heartbreak when people get so distraught because someone is leaving them. And they really feel, just like we described with cocaine addiction, there's a real withdrawal. There's a terrible withdrawal feeling. And people can become suicidal. And that's not good. That's bad. And people can do risky things that are not necessarily suicide to try to win the other person back.
And when you finally do break up, a lot of people have to completely rediscover who they are.
The thing that's so important about addictions is that they change one's sense of self, and that makes it very hard to give them up. Going out and doing activities that are different from the activities you did with your romantic partner, kind of making a new life, going on a trip, it's the classic thing to do after heartbreak, to, go on a trip to someplace you've never been. It's redefining yourself, because yourself has been defined by either the drug you've been taking or the person who you've had a close relationship with. One needs to really develop a new self, do different things. And of course, that takes time. And over time, the addiction will decrease and go away. There's no doubt for almost everybody, it goes away. And that's a hopeful thing. It's a real learning experience. It's, this addiction to each other is just part of being human.
Brown and Fisher's 2016 study reveals romantic rejection triggers a part of the brain associated with drug craving. However, participants recovering from rejection also lit up a section that's linked with learning and complex thinking.
People are going to experience loss and very intense emotions. But when other things in our brain kick in, where we create a story, a narrative about what happens, we try to understand it, we try to empathize with the other person, we experience relief from that. Those techniques can be beneficial because they engage those areas and can help us to strengthen those self-regulatory mechanisms so that we frame this very human, very primal experience in a way where we can move on and make sense of it.
That's Dr. Bianca Acevedo, a researcher at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She says our ability to learn from past relationships is the best thing for future ones, even if we aren't able to realize that right after a breakup. Rejection can be emotionally overwhelming, so Brown advises talking with friends and taking a Tylenol for the headache after you've cried.
We have to mourn. Again, this is another human thing. To be addicted to someone is totally part of the human experience. To be rejected by someone and to feel really badly about it is part of the human experience and kind of a necessary experience. These are systems necessary for us, so it's hard to put any positive spin on anything when you're heartbroken. You can't be talked into it. But the fact is, you're learning something, and the fact that you have that system there means that you will be working hard on another relationship.
But we might have to live through a couple of lessons before it sticks.
There was one study in Florida of college students, and they asked, have you ever dumped somebody who really loved you? And 95% said yes. And then they asked, have you ever been dumped by somebody who you really loved? And 93% said yes. So bottom line is, I mean, nobody gets out of love alive. We all have experiences where one person likes the relationship a great deal more than others. That's nothing new about that.
And just like how we all experience rejection differently, Fisher thinks love addiction can differ based on our personalities.
I think there's different forms of love addiction, and yes, I do think it does have to do with personality. I have proven that we have evolved 4 very broad styles of thinking and behaving, like with the dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen systems. There's an awful lot of brain systems, but most of them keep the eyes blinking and the heart beating. They're not linked with any personality traits, but these 4 brain systems are each linked with a constellation of personality traits.
Fisher hasn't proven the connection yet, but has an idea on how each style of thinking interacts with love. She calls people who have traits from the dopamine system explorers.
They're novelty-seeking, risk-taking, curious, creative, spontaneous, energetic people. And it's my guess, my hypothesis, that they are going to be somewhat more predisposed to being romance junkies.
The second style of thinking is linked to the serotonin system. Fisher calls this group builders.
My hypothesis is that they're going to be more likely to be attachment junkies. These people are what they call social norm conforming. They follow the rules. They see a sense of duty. They're going to stick in something that's too long.
Directors make up the third style that's linked with the testosterone system.
Analytical, logical, direct, decisive, tough-minded people. Testosterone is linked with assertiveness. I mean, that's why they used to castrate bulls, for Christ's sake. It has long been linked with being assertive. And my hypothesis is that they may well be a little bit more predisposed to being violence junkies, the kinds that are going to stalk, to threaten, to kill.
The last style of thinking is connected to the estrogen system, called negotiators.
They see the big picture, contextual, holistic, long-term thinkers, imaginative, and I think they are more inclined to be codependent junkies.
All of these ideas are built off of revolutionary research, but there's still so much we don't understand about love. And though some people may be content with love staying a mystery, Brown says we have to know our brain in order to truly know ourselves.
I think one of the problems that we've had through the centuries is that we've said, oh, love doesn't matter, it just happens, you have no control over it, and people have thought it's a bad thing, and there's nothing we can do about it. The fact is, what science is telling us is that there are things that we can do about it, that we can learn about it, we can learn about ourselves. And if we know ourselves, we're going to be in a much better position to then know our partners and to create a healthy relationship and really enjoy it.
Love addiction happens to nearly everyone, but no two relationships are the same. Whether we end the relationship or not, our minds learn from each experience until we become addicted to the right person.
Romantic love is a very powerful brain system. It evolved millions of years ago to start the mating process. As I said, people not only pine for love, they live for love, they kill for love, and they die for love. It's a powerful brain system.
And since we haven't figured out how to outrun evolution, falling in love is still out of our control. But now that we know what's happening in our brain, Fisher says we can understand how to deal with it better. You can learn more about your love and relationship styles on Brown and Fisher's website, theanatomyoflove.com. Fisher's book, Anatomy of Love, is available now. Information about all of our guests can be found at our website, radiohealthjournal.org. Our writer-producer this week is Kristen Farah. I'm Reed Pence. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
Not everybody is ready for a transformative life change, so we want to make sure everybody has access to the information and resources that they need to be safe and healthy.
How a historic focus on harm reduction can save lives.
Then how implicit bias and racial discrimination amongst healthcare providers results in poor quality of care for people of color.
It's unfortunate that a person of color would feel inferior or feel they are not there.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
We don't have any FDA-approved medications for cocaine or for methamphetamine or for cannabis.
The difficult task of finding effective treatments for addiction. Then,
we think of JFK and we think of RFK. We think of the Kennedys of the past and the roles that they played and the tragedies that they've faced.
Uncovering the Kennedys you've heard little about. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.